Well, welcome everybody. I think we should go ahead and get started. My name is Whitney Austin. I am the Executive Director of Whitney Strong, an organization that I co-founded with my husband, who is here with me today, about 2.5 years ago. Our organization was founded to end gun violence, and we do that by championing solutions that are common ground, data-driven, and focused on responsible gun ownership. Before I jump in, I do want to talk just briefly about the art that is behind me. Again, you'll meet my husband here shortly, but after the shooting, my husband as an artist decided to take the pain that he had experienced with what had happened to me and throw himself into his art. So the art behind me is a reflection of that pain. And I hope that it is just another reminder of why we do this work. So with today's rally, and I know it's a little bit different, right? I wish we could be in person with a rally, so we're going to keep this as high energy as possible. But with today's rally, I have two goals for all of you. First, I want to make sure you walk away educated on what crisis aversion and rights retention really is. And then secondly, I want you to walk away educated on the role you can play as one individual helping us with its passage this session in Kentucky in 2021. So those are my goals, and I know we will accomplish them. Let me talk just a minute about the agenda. I said it's not in person, but it is a rally, so I have many high energy presenters with me today, and I will share who they are in just a minute. But in terms of the agenda, we are going to have two Q&As. The first question and answer session, which I think you all know how it works now within Zoom. There's a Q&A panel at the bottom. Select that. The first one will be focused on asking questions relative to what is CARR and any questions you may have for the state senators. Then we will move into the second component of the agenda, which is focused again on you and what you can do to help us in this effort. And so questions should reflect that subject matter. So I mentioned we have a great team. Let me go ahead and advance the slide. This is who has joined us today. So I mentioned my husband, Waller Austin. He'll be jumping on the screen here in a minute. We have several members of Sandy Hook Promise, which is an organization that has been helping Whitney Strong in this effort almost from the very beginning. We have Mark Barden, Aurora Vasquez, and Nalini Ramachandran. We also have Jen Poliakonis, who is from the Coalition to Stop Gun Violence, another key partner in this initiative. And then lastly, but most importantly, we have two of our sponsors, State Senators Morgan McGarvey and Paul Hornback. All right, so to kick us off, I'm going to take us back to where it all begins for me. If you know me at all, if you've ever had a conversation with me, you know that I constantly talk about how I am the luckiest person to walk this earth. I am so lucky that I survived a mass shooting, that I got back to my precious family, and that I get to do this work every day. I get to live this life of purpose. And so I think you'd be hard pressed to find someone more grateful for me. And I think this is exactly where we need to start our rally off today. So I'm going to share a video with you to kick us off. On September 6, 2018, I walked into a mass shooting at my place of employment in Cincinnati, Ohio.
Multiple shooting victims. We have a active shooter.
Just after 9 a.m., authorities say the gunman, 29-year-old Omar Perez, opened fire in the loading dock area of the Fifth Third Bank building, striking several people.
I'm Whitney Austin, and I am a miracle. I was shot
12 times, but not once did a bullet hit a major organ or artery, and I know how lucky I am to have survived. I'm so grateful and I am so lucky. That's why I've started Whitney Strong. It's my new purpose in life. I'm gonna take this massive gift that I've been given and pay it forward. While I was involved in a mass shooting, we are focused on ending gun violence of all kinds, whether it's suicides or it's street violence. They are all a problem that we need to solve. Here at Whitney Strong, we believe we can do better together. We are going to approach this issue from the center, and we're going to do it by championing responsible gun ownership solutions. So we want everybody involved in this conversation. We want Republicans, we want Democrats, we want gun owners and non-gun owners. When we all come together, we will truly be able to curb gun violence and save lives.
All right. That video is a roller coaster of emotions for me, but I end with the biggest grin that you have ever seen because it pumps me up and it reminds me of exactly what this organization was founded to do, which is pull people together. Whether it is the work we do at Whitney Strong that is non-legislative or legislative, the only way we can make progress on this issue is by pulling everyone together. And when I say everyone, we mean Democrats and Republicans. We mean non-gun owners and gun owners, every race, every ethnicity. We have got to pull everyone into this moment. This is a significant moment for our state. This is the first time in over a decade we have a chance to pass legislation to help keep us safe. So I hope that you are inspired and that you will pull as many people as possible into this movement so our voices can be shared across Kentucky. All right, so I told you our first goal is that I wanted to make sure you knew what crisis aversion and rights retention is. It is aptly named. It is exactly that. It is a law to help avert crisis moments, whether it is a moment in which a gun owner is in crisis because they are threatening to harm themselves or others. And it is also all about rights retention so that we intervene before that crisis moment erupts and that gun owner then loses their right to a firearm forever. And of course, keeps everyone safe, the gun owner included. It is hard for me to talk about crisis aversion and rights retention without giving you a little bit of history as to how we got to this monumental moment in the state of Kentucky. So let me give you a little bit of history. And this picture is just one of the big moments, again, that makes me smile. So I'll take you back to a little bit after September 6, 2018. I spent almost a week in the hospital. I returned back to my home and I was lucky enough to meet with Senator Morgan McGarvey, who happens to be my state senator here in Louisville. I will never forget him giving me a bunch of literature and saying, Whitney, you study, you educate yourself, and once you have an idea what you would like to do to help reduce gun violence in this state, I will be there to help you. And he has been there every step of the way, and I am so thankful to him. Fast forward a little bit into 2019, I started to heal and feel confident enough that I could leave my home and take more action to try and help keep our state safe. And I was lucky enough to have a meeting with Senator Hornback. It was similar to now. It was cold. I can remember a fire burning in the fireplace, and I will never forget how good of a listener he was and how authentic our connection was. I knew that he cared about what had happened to me and that he cared deeply about making sure that it didn't happen to other Kentuckians. And we also bonded over the fact that we were both gun owners and we understood the importance of making sure to pull gun owners into this movement. It continued to build. It was, I'd say, a team of three, and building as we tried to decide what was right for Kentucky. It built to November 2019, and this picture that you see here in front of us, where we were the first organization in the last decade to pull both judiciary committees together for an interim hearing on, at that point, which was extreme risk protection orders. In that hearing, we heard loud and clear all of the things the legislature liked and did not like relative to extreme risk protection orders. We took that feedback and all of the feedback that we've gathered since meeting with legislators to get us to this moment of crisis aversion and rights retention as truly a unique and custom solution that is right for Kentucky. And it is meant to prevent suicide and to prevent mass violence. I'll tell you how it works. And I think the best way to do that is to give you a hypothetical scenario that could be real in the lives of some of the attendees today even. So imagine, if you will, that I have a brother and my brother is former military and he's suicidal and he has many firearms within his home. I've tried to talk to him. My parents have tried to talk to him. All of his buddies have tried to talk to him. But there is nothing we can do. He doesn't understand the importance of separating him from that highly lethal method at this moment where he is really struggling. So what can I do? With crisis aversion and rights retention, I would go to local law enforcement and I would explain my story and provide evidence as to why I believe he is an imminent risk to harm himself. Traditionally, law enforcement is in a better position to investigate and assess risk. They assess and they determine I'm right, that we need to do something about this to keep my brother safe. They will go to a district court judge and file a petition for a crisis aversion and rights retention order. That district judge will review the petition, determine if the evidence is enough to meet the burden of proof. Let's assume that the burden of proof is met. The judge will then issue a temporary order. That order goes back to law enforcement, and law enforcement goes back to my brother's home to report this order has been placed. We need to temporarily remove these firearms so that you are safe, and you will have a hearing, a due process hearing, 2 weeks from today. My brother then has the opportunity to be represented, to bring evidence to that hearing. Once arriving at the hearing, the judge then determines if the burden of proof has been met to extend that order. The order's maximum is 1 year, but it is not automatic and it is not always 1 year. So let's say after reviewing the evidence that the judge determines that the order should be extended on my brother for 6 months. What can I do? What can my brother do? So now he's separated for 6 months. At least I have some relief that he is safe for that 6-month period. If my brother continues to disagree with the order, he can go to the judge and request another hearing to provide new evidence of changes in behavior actions he has taken to get himself to a better place after 90 days have passed. On the reverse side of things, if I'm concerned that at the end of 6 months that that's not enough time, that he's still at risk, imminent risk of hurting himself, I can ask the judge for it to be extended. And that information and that evidence would need to be reviewed. The last thing I'll share is while he is separated from his firearm, we want him to get better. That's what this bill is all about. It's about retaining rights and helping the person in that moment of crisis get better. And so what can we do? We can offer services and encourage him strongly to get help for whatever it is that landed him in that moment. And if he takes those steps and he makes those changes, that is all evidence that can be reviewed by the judge to decide if the order needs to be decreased at some point. So that's how the process will flow and that's how it will work. I think the most important thing for you to realize when it comes to this order and how you speak about it to your friends and family is we are concerned there are more crisis moments erupting than ever before because of COVID. And gun owners are just like non-gun owners. They can have moments of crisis, and we need this tool to be able to keep them safe and to also be able to keep all of us safe. Right, I mentioned that Whitney Strong is really into data, so I thought this was an interesting point to share with all of you before I pass it over to our first presenter. A poll was completed in 2019 of Kentucky registered voters, so think proportionally distributed based upon registration, over 600 of them back in 2019. And what we found out is that 8 out of 10 voters in Kentucky would be as likely or more likely to vote for their legislator if they supported a risk protection bill like crisis aversion and rights retention. So I know I said many times I need you to be that megaphone. Here's another data point that you can use when you talk to your friends and family across Kentucky. All right, I'm going to pass it over now to Senator Morgan McGarvey to kick us off.
Thank you so much, Whitney. It is awesome to be here with everyone. And yes, I so remember meeting with you. And I mean, you had just gotten home from the hospital, but you were as dedicated then as you are now. And thanks to your dedication and your enthusiasm, I think we're really seeing progress, which I'll be honest, when you, as you and I have been talking over the years, when you said, I want to get involved and pass some type of sensible gun reform solution here in Kentucky, I knew that the hill was steep in front of you, but the way you've done it is so commendable. And there, we've got Mark on the call today, who is a musician. I just like music, but Tyler Childers sings a song and he says, it's twice as hard to build bridges you've burned. And what you've done, Whitney, is be able to go across the entire state, meet with Democrats, meet with Republicans, meet with urban people, meet with rural people, listen to the concerns that people legitimately have, and not burn any bridges. In fact, only bring people onto your team. And that's why I think it's exciting to see this bill. I think it's exciting to see it come forward this session with bipartisan support. And even though it's a short session, I'm excited to see the progress we make on it, and we'll continue as we go on. So very excited to be here, excited what's going on, and look forward to what's next.
Thank you so much, Senator McGarvey. We're going to go ahead and move on to our next speaker, which is Jen Poliakonis from the Coalition to Stop Gun Violence. I talked a little bit about data. She is going to do a great job of helping you understand the problem of gun violence in the state of Kentucky, and then also some of the research behind it that proves the effectiveness of this law. So Jen, I'll pass it over to you.
Thank you. So thank you so much, Whitney, for having me today. First, I'm actually going to talk about the why. Why does Kentucky need this law? If you could go back, Whitney. And then I'm going to talk about why it works. Whitney explained the policy of CARR, and we're just going to go into a few of those details. But first, I just want to talk about the fact in 2019, which is the most recent data just released last month from the CDC, there were 682 gun deaths. Of those, 65% or 470 were actually firearm suicides, and 201, or about 31%, were firearm homicides. And you can go to the next slide. I will let everyone know that just so you have something to compare this with, if you compare by rate to average out the population in all of the different states, Kentucky actually has the 14th highest rate of gun violence in the country, combined for both suicide and homicide. And you'll see here that of all of the homicides in Kentucky, 80% of them are completed with a firearm. And for all of the suicides in Kentucky in 2019, almost 60% were completed with a firearm. So you can see that a firearm, the reason that this is the focus is because in the United States, it is the most lethal means for homicides and suicide. And what we're really trying to do with CARR is to temporarily prevent access to that most lethal means. And we know by looking at some of the research, next slide, that there is a growing body of research that shows that laws similar to the Crisis Aversion and Rights Retention Bill do work. The CARR is based on protection order laws, risk protection order laws across the country. And the reason that they work is because they're actually aimed at those at elevated risk of violence by focusing on the risk factors that put someone most at risk of either harm to selves or harm to others. Next slide. One of the most exciting studies that we have related to risk protection orders is from Dr. Jeff Swanson from Duke University. And he is able to look at the original risk warrant laws that CARR and similar laws were based upon. And the reason that we look at Connecticut and Indiana's laws is because those are the oldest. And so we have the most data for these states. Really, laws that are similar to CARR in other states, while of course CARR is completely customized for Kentucky, are relatively new. And so we're only just starting to ensure that we're getting statewide studies based on those as well. But from looking at Connecticut's risk warrant law from 1999 to 2013, the study found that 1 suicide was prevented for every 10 to 20 orders. And in Indiana, 1 suicide was prevented for every 10 orders. So this is a tool that is incredibly successful at preventing firearm suicide. And the reason that this is true is because when they looked at the suicide rates among the respondents, they found in Connecticut that this annual suicide rate is 40 times higher than the general population. And in Indiana, that the suicide rate was 31 times higher. That means we know that the laws similar to CARR are actually aimed at those who are most at risk of harming themselves. And that is incredibly important. This is not aimed at all gun owners. This is aimed with those who are showing the risk factors that they are suffering from a crisis and they need a temporary solution. They need someone to support them. They need that loved one to come and show them that they care and remove temporarily that most lethal means before a tragedy occurs. Next slide, Whitney. And we've also found in some of the newer studies, and this one is really just descriptive as well, the next one that I discuss. This study or examination is out of California, looking at California's risk protection order. And they found that in 21 orders, the respondents showed clear signs that they intended to commit mass violence. But in all of those 21 orders, there were no, once the firearms were temporarily removed, there were no incidents of any type of mass violence or violence. So we know that at least in those 21 incidents, it seemed to prevent the mass shooting. Next slide. So I really thought that this was interesting in terms of helping us see who are the respondents for risk protection orders in other states, and how could CARR potentially be used in Kentucky? And so this is a descriptive study out of Washington State. And between the end of 2016 and May of 2019, there were 238 protection orders. And of those, 67 were harm to self, 86 were harm to others, and 84 were both. So you can see it's pretty even in terms of those who have a protection order issued to help support them in terms of the different types of gun violence that's out there. And to give you another idea, at least in Washington State, most of these orders were petitioned by law enforcement. So it wasn't family members. Some states allow expanded petitioners, but in Washington State, they found that most of the orders were actually petitioned by law enforcement. And in addition to that, while protection orders in CARR is really based on risk factors more so than a mental health diagnosis, because we know that actually only 4% of all interpersonal gun violence is committed by those with severe mental illness. So mental illness is not actually the best risk factor for determining whether someone is going to hurt a loved one or whether they are going to hurt themselves. Typically, it's risk factors to show that they are in a crisis, and they aren't always a mental health crisis. It could be the loss of a job, so financial crisis. It could be the end of a relationship. Oftentimes, violence is really impulsive, and that's why something that is temporary can allow someone to get through that crisis without finding that connection with the most lethal means. And in Washington, 30% of the respondents, the judges found that the risk behaviors that they were exhibiting felt that they should have a mental health evaluation. So 30% of them had a mental health evaluation. And then the authors of the study concluded that protection orders actually helped individuals gain access to the mental health care that they needed. And so different states work differently. There's a variety. CARR is going to be its own unique law. And so once we get it passed, we'll have to make sure we have data collection so we can track its effectiveness as well. But we're seeing really great progress over the country. And this is something, again, aimed at those most at risk. And we know that it's effective. And that is what's most important.
Thank you, Jen. Really appreciate you sharing that this bill that we are championing will work and reduce violence. That is the whole point. It is dawning on me that it's probably a good time for me to share with you what makes crisis aversion and rights retention order different from some of the more traditional risk warrant laws that exist across the country. And if you go back to that hearing and the many conversations that we've had with the legislature, I'd say it boils down to 3 key points. The first is making sure that the scope of petitioners and the scope of respondents is super narrow. So one, making sure that only law enforcement can take the petition to a district court judge to ensure, again, believing that they have the ability to assess risk better than the everyday person, and serving as a filter as to who ends up in district court with the petition. And then secondly, on the side of the respondent, and making sure that it is truly only those people who are in imminent risk to harming themselves or others. So that's point 1. The second point is all about getting them help. We heard loud and clear from the legislature that if you just remove the gun, you have ignored the underlying issue that has led them to this crisis moment. And we care at Whitney Strong. We want those gun owners to get back to a better place and to be able to retain their rights. So we worked very closely with the mental health community and advocates across the state of Kentucky to make sure the language was just right, to do everything we could to encourage those respondents to get the help that they need so that they can be reunited with their gun. And then lastly, and this one is unique but very important to gun owners, we heard loudly and clearly that gun owners want to be able to see a responsible party petition to be able to store those firearms. So instead of automatically law enforcement storing the firearm, a responsible party can petition, or we'll just say a non-cohabitating member of their family or otherwise can petition the court to request to be able to store the firearm for them. And that really came from a place of one, the gun owners wanting to make sure that their highly valued firearms were stored safely. And then we even heard this weekend from law enforcement that that was an important component for them in the instances that they may not have enough storage to be able to store those firearms. So those are the big 3. Now, continuing on, I want to, let me go ahead and pull up a video again. I'm going to introduce you to the managing director of Sandy Hook Promise. But first, I would like to share a video of Mark and his beautiful son, Daniel, who was murdered in the Sandy Hook shooting.
You would pick up ants. You would pick up ants from the kitchen, carry them outside to reconnect them with their families. He'd pick up worms from the driveway and rescue them from the sun. If he saw a classmate sitting alone or having a bad day, he had a way of noticing if someone or something was vulnerable. He was just compelled to go comfort that person. He had to be there to take care of them. I choose to honor Daniel's life by sharing his love and his joy with everyone I can. I promise to parent together, to build communities that are healthy and safe and better for children everywhere.
All right, I want to pass it over to Mark Barden, again, the Managing Director of Sandy Hook, and to say first, thank you so much for lending of your resources to support us in this effort. And secondly, thank you for serving as inspiration to me to never give up and to keep living this life of purpose when it's not always easy.
Thank you, Whitney. And I appreciate the honor of participating in this rally. And I believe so strongly in this legislation and your mission, Whitney, especially coming from your perspective. I would be there in person, as you know I would, if I could. So I appreciate this opportunity. And good on you, Kentucky, and your wonderful state legislature for bringing this important, effective legislation to your constituents across the state. It has bipartisan support, and it's universal, and you've relied on feedback from everyone to really craft it so that it works as well as it can protect Kentucky in a meaningful way. And I just want to say that up front before I tell you a little bit more about my story and why this is so important to me. So congratulations to all of you for doing this hard work and making Kentucky safer for it. Let's hope that we can get the word out and get everybody engaged in this to help this get across the finish line. And I'm telling you this because from my personal experience, as Senator McGarvey mentioned before, I'm a musician by trade. I was so fortunate to be able to do what I love to do. And it also allowed me to be home with my 3 children during most of the days. And it was the most wonderful thing to be able to have that bond and to connect with them in such a deep and personal, intimate way. And Daniel, who you just saw in the video, was a very special, very compassionate little boy. And he was our 3rd. And as the youngest, he and I got to spend a lot of time together, just the 2 of us. And there's not a minute that goes by, I will spend the rest of my life wishing I could have done anything to go back in time and prevent what happened to my little Daniel, so that he didn't have to cower in his 1st grade classroom while a gunman shot him to death along with his classmates and his teachers. And that is my reality, that is my life. And I have chosen to do, since I can't go back and prevent that from happening, I have chosen through my work with Sandy Hook Promise to do everything that I can to bring the tools and the trainings and the awareness and the education to other folks who can prevent these tragedies from happening. And that's what we do with Sandy Hook Promise. We train students how to recognize warning signs, because we know there are warning signs. We've done our research, we've done our homework, and people do exhibit warning signs before they hurt themselves or somebody else. And that is an opportunity for us to intervene and connect that person to the help that they need before it becomes something more serious. And what we're talking about here with the Crisis Aversion and Rights Retention Bill is exactly that. That's a tool. It's a manifestation of exactly what we do with Sandy Hook Promise, training people how to recognize warning signs and connecting that person to help, or getting them out of harm's way before it becomes something more serious. And I can't tell you how important it is to me that this tool is available now. This tool is available. So when somebody witnesses a family member who's in crisis, who's at risk of hurting themselves or somebody else, there is now a tool available, as Whitney just very clearly explained to us. And Jen just showed us all the data that goes along with it and all the research that backs it up, that there is now a tool available to prevent countless families from having to live this pain. And like I said, it's very important to me. It's deeply personal to me. When I met Whitney, and her story is horrifying, it's incredible, and she is one of the luckiest people I know. And she has chosen to dedicate her life to this work, as I have. And for all of these people to come together with the Kentucky State Legislature to bring this to bill to the folks of Kentucky, I think is very important and very significant. I'm in it all the way, and I support you, and I'm here to help in any way I can. Thank you for being a shining light and to allow Kentucky to be a model for states across the country. Thank you for what you're doing.
Thank you, Mark. I always get emotional when I hear him speak. Really, such a sense of inspiration for me. So thank you. All right, trying to tampen down the emotion. I do have one piece of data that I want to share before I introduce our next speaker. So Senator Hornback cares certainly about averting mass violence, but I know that suicide is very important to him, especially coming from a rural environment where we have seen suicide rates increase at a higher level than outside of rural areas. And this graph really brings it home for me when you think about our state. So suicide has been growing nationally for the last 2 decades, but you look at the US, which is the blue line, and then you look at the red line for Kentucky, and you can see that our suicide rate has increased 30% more than the national rate. And then when you start to dissect how people are dying by suicide, you can see that most Kentuckians who died by suicide over the past decade used a highly lethal firearm, 64%, and that puts us 13% points higher than the national rate for firearm suicide, which is 51%. So just another compelling stat that you can share when you discuss why the time is now to do something about this legislation. So thank you. I'm going to pass it over to Senator Paul Hornback.
Whitney, can you hear me, Whitney? I first want to thank you for getting this together and bringing this to the forefront and being introduced to you. I appreciate the time we spent together, how you've educated me on gun rights, on mass violence, and to you and Mark, we can only thank that we know what you all have gone through, but it's got to be tremendous. And Morgan, thank you for your help in helping get this drafted. You know, Whitney, when we started out, we had a lot of good ideas. It's taken a while to get to where we're at now. This crisis aversion and rights retention, to me, is just what it says it is. You know, and I think that all of us that are elected officials, you know, our number one goal is that we're supposed to be here to protect people and keep them safe from harm and try to help people out of crises they may have. And I think that's exactly what this does. It's so much different from last year when we appeared before committee with the extreme risk protection order. This is a piece of legislation that truly goes after the heart of the problem to help people prior to any type of crisis they may have in their life. And I'm pleased to be able to say I'm going to be a proud sponsor of that, to try to get that done. You know, you and I and all of us, I think, on this call are a lot alike. We believe in Second Amendment rights. You're a gun owner, like you've mentioned already. I'm a gun owner. I believe it as our constitutional right. And this doesn't violate that. It goes after trying to help people. And that's what I'm all about. I always try to help people throughout life, and I think all of you all do too. And so that's what we're trying to do with this. It's always a tough call. It's always tough to get these things done. But Whitney, we've gained a lot of ground this year. We've got a lot more supporters. You and I and everybody else have talked to a lot of people, and it's doing good things. And when you look at the rates, the time that we're in now, the rates of suicide that we have, and if we can help what those numbers show is in other states, those people that are thinking about committing harm to themselves, that's very personal to me. You know, that's what we need to be trying to do, is any way we can to avert the loss of life and help people have a better future. So Whitney, thank you very much. Thank you for the opportunity. It's always great to work with you and to see you anytime.
Thank you, Senator Hornback. Senator Hornback is our sponsor on this bill that we'll file this week, and I can't thank him enough. Everybody should thank him a lot. All right, so this concludes the first portion of the presentation. And just a reminder, we have not yet got to the part where we're telling you what you can do to help us in this effort with session in 2021. This is for questions that are relative to what is crisis aversion and rights retention, and then also anything you may want to ask of the senators since they'll be jumping off for the second portion of the call. I'm going to pass it over to Aurora Vasquez from Sandy Hook Promise, who will manage the Q&A function for us.
Thank you, Whitney. Hi, everyone. Thank you for joining us. In the event this is your first Zoom webinar, and I doubt that, but in the event it is, and you're wondering how to submit a question, somewhere on your screen, usually across the bottom, there's a little box that says Q&A, and it has two like thought bubbles. If you click on that, you can type in a message and your question, I should say, and it will come to us. You may not see the question, others may not see the question, but we will be seeing it. And then I will direct the questions out directly to somebody on the panel to ask for them to answer. So we have a couple of questions in the queue already. And I also have a couple of questions that we get asked all the time in doing this work. And I will also put those on the table for our participants as well to be able to answer. So the first question is, has anyone surveyed judges in district courts who would hear these cases? If so, what do they say? So I'm going to start with Whitney, because I know Whitney has had some of these direct conversations. And then if either Senator McGarvey or Senator Hornback would like to follow up, feel free. So Whitney, what are the judges in district court saying about this?
Yeah, I'll share a little bit, and then I'm going to definitely pass it over to Senator McGarvey since he's been integral in these conversations. But yes, making sure that the district court judges are involved and supportive is very important to this effort. I can tell you personally, I've done my own shadowing of the district court judges in Louisville to get better acquainted with some of those judges and also to get better acquainted to some of the other processes that often get suggested as potentially this is the thing to solve the problem, which is really not the thing to solve the problem. So we have been in conversation with the district court judges. We have incorporated their feedback to make sure procedurally this is very tight. And we are excited to continue to use their voices as we move this forward. Senator McGarvey, what else would you like to add to that?
Sure, no, and I've talked extensively with the district court judges, including last year meeting with the entirety of the district court policy team from across the state of Kentucky. I think there were 10 judges in the room, and we sat and we were going line by line through the legislation. And so basically the district court judges, they're not taking a policy position on the bill, which is probably a good thing as a judge to not take a policy position. But what they've been really helpful in doing is telling us, have you thought about this is actually what I hear most often from them, because what they're concerned with are the practical effects of how this bill's actually going to work. What's it going to look like when a police officer walks into their courtroom with these petitions, and then it actually goes to a real live human being who then has to come in front of the court as well. So we've had a great working relationship with the district court judges and have tried to iron out any of the potential problems for when this thing goes live.
Great. Thank you. Okay, so additional questions are coming in. We have a question, and I will direct this one to Senator Hornback. The question is, when will the bill be filed? It would seem people are interested in being able to read it and to be able to react to it themselves. So Senator Hornback?
It will be filed this week. I don't know whether it'll be, what I would like to do is file it on Wednesday, but either tomorrow or Wednesday, depending on the time frame we have, because I'd like to tell folks about it on the floor. So just depending what our time's running like, but in the next couple of days.
Perfect, great. And here's another one, Senator Hornback, that I'd like you to answer first, and then we'll give it over to Senator McGarvey. So there tends to be a lot of misinformation or misunderstanding as it relates to this type of approach, the temporary transfer of firearms away from a person in crisis. So what kind of response are you getting from your colleagues when you talk to them about this approach?
Well, Aurora, I think it's just what you said. I think there's a lot of misinformation, interpretation of what this bill will do. This is in no way a red flag bill or some of the things that have been proposed in other states in the past and even passed in other states. You know, this is truly a bill, and that's the reason I want to give a speech about it after I introduce the bill, is to let people know what the true effect of this is. This is crisis aversion and rights retention, that we want to do both. That we don't want to do anything that would harm your Second Amendment rights. And this doesn't do that. And when you talked about judges, that's one thing we got back from judges is they would rather stretch back the length of time that you can come back and request those firearms or other weapons be returned to that person. We stuck tight, Whitney and all of us. We want this to be fast. We want this to be responsive in the court system because we don't want them to be separated, whether the firearms have been removed by law enforcement to foreign law enforcement, or like not many other bills do in the nation. This gives the opportunity for a legal family member to take possession of those firearms. So they're not necessarily removed from the family. And those things are very important when doing this. But the goal of it is to help avert those crises, get people help so that they can get over those temporary disabilities they have.
Thank you. Senator McGarvey, anything to add?
Yeah, sure. And first of all, I think it's worth reading. Thank you so much to Senator Hornback, the amazing job he has done in taking this around to the different legislators in Kentucky and really, I mean, listening and listening to people's concerns, and sometimes listening when they were mad and sometimes listening when they were happy, but really has done a fantastic job. It's been a real pleasure to work with him on this. And, you know, in listening, I think we've made the bill a lot better too. Here's one small example. You know, when Senator Hornback and I would take this bill around to people's offices, we had one guy say, why are you taking the guns and the ammunition? Have you thought about the problems this could pose if you're taking all different types of ammunition, all these different types of things? So we took the word ammunition out of the bill, and you know, are trying to just make it a sensible thing where, again, we're trying to help people out. We know this is effective. They've had a version of this in Indiana, right across the river from us, for 15, 16 years now. And their suicide rates are lower than Kentucky's. So we know this works, but you know, it takes a special type of person and personality to really walk this through the Kentucky General Assembly. And we're lucky to have Senator Hornback working on it.
Great, thank you. And here's a quick question for Whitney. Someone has asked if you can speak a little bit to the artwork behind you.
I think I should let my husband speak to the artwork. I'll swap seats real quick.
Hello, everyone. I'm Waller. I'm Whitney's husband. So yeah, the work behind me is it just tells a story. So I try to collapse those 5 minutes of terror, trauma that Whitney experienced, along with many others, into a box. So I wanted to, you know, to show gun violence without gore, without, you know, blood and guts, without death, with all just kind of a very cold view of the problem that we have, and the greater issue of all of the gun violence that we have, while trying to maintain our Second Amendment rights. So I am a gun owner, and having Whitney shot I've been complacent for a very long time about issues that I saw, particularly with people in crisis, and just not speaking to it. And so the guns, well, the artwork behind me are the replicas of the gun that was used in the shooting, which is a 809 Taurus 9mm pistol. And then there's 35 flesh tone bullets in each one of them. So there were 35 bullets that were shot. Whitney was shot with 12 of those bullets. Other people were shot with less and ended up losing their lives. But ultimately, the piece is just made to out of reaction of the incident, and to tell the story, and kind of my disgust with just the fact that how many guns are just moving. It's a it's a commerce issue, and fighting with the NRA and fighting with the production of guns. So it's kind of a tongue-in-cheek thing, producing all of these guns that have their own serial number and their own modified color that won't be repeated. It's kind of a, to make money for our organization to end gun violence. So I'm sorry for that wordy explanation, but there's a lot in it. So, but it's kind of, it just tells our story in a very collapsed form.
Sure. Thank you for that, Waller. And now I'm going to combine two questions that were similar in their concept. And the first question was a question about how the events of September 2018, Whitney, this question is for you, might have been different for both you and the shooter had CARR been in place. And the question I'm combining it with is another question that came in that asked if you could explain again how this averts a crisis and how it retains rights. So I think those can kind of go together in how you talk about yourself and the shooter in the September 28th incident.
Yeah, with every mass violence incident, the facts are different. And to be honest, we're still investigating the facts with my shooting all the way back to September 6, 2018. What we know about him is that he was chronically and severely mentally ill, and that he had been living in Cincinnati for some period of time. But as to whether crisis aversion and rights retention or any risk protection order law could have saved what happened to me and then saved the lives of 3 innocent people, there's no way to know for sure, right? Because this law is predicated upon someone seeing those warning signs and taking action. And so it is possible that it could have changed my outcome, but at this point in time, there is not enough evidence out there to know for sure. What I can tell you for sure is when I started to look through all of the literature that Senator McGarvey provided to me, I was certain that this was the bill that I wanted to move forward in the state of Kentucky, because it is the bill championed across the country to help avert incidents of mass violence. And I won't list all of the examples, the very high profile cases of mass shootings across this country, but I know every single one of you can think of one where this could have made a difference and this could have saved lives. So the incident was so personal that I felt compelled that this was the thing that needed to move forward. As far as how does it work again? Why is it averting crisis and why is it rights retention? It's averting crisis really in 2 scenarios. The one is firearm suicide and being able to recognize those warning signs and knowing that firearms are a highly lethal method of suicide and taking action by going to law enforcement to ask for help. Help me file this petition. Here's all the evidence that I have. The second instance is with mass violence, and it works the exact same way. Here's all my evidence. This is what I have to show you that this person is at imminent risk of harming others. Help me do something about this. And then on the flip side, for retaining rights, it is all about intervening before the crisis erupts and getting the person the help that they need so they can get back to a place in which gun ownership is safe. If we do not intervene, then they will lose their right to their firearm permanently, or even worse, they will die. So that's exactly how this incorporates rights retention.
Thank you. And one more question, I think it's incredibly important to help frame the immediate and long-term impacts of a crisis aversion and rights retention order. And Senator McGarvey, I'll ask you to weigh in on this because I've heard you talk about this side of things before. So in light of the fact that law enforcement plays a central role in this process, is there anything about the process of obtaining a crisis aversion and rights retention order that produces a criminal record for the respondent or that criminalizes them in any way? And part of the reason this gets asked is because we know folks are concerned about protecting their right to bear arms. And so often, if you have certain types of criminal records, you can't have a gun. So what's the balance there?
No, and this is something that we've obviously been very concerned with from the very start, is how do we respect people's rights while also keeping people safe? And that means even from themselves as part of this process. So no, this is not a criminalization process. This is a law enforcement officer, a peace officer, who has sufficient grounds to file this CARR, this emergency rights petition order. Only then you actually get to go through a hearing in front of the judge. But none of this process creates a criminal record. It is not a criminal action that you're being involved with. So no, there is no criminal record associated with this whatsoever that would harm your ability to get a job, to own a firearm, to do something in the future.
Thank you. Thank you. Okay, and there are a couple of more questions in the queue, but we are at time and need to move on to the second half of our time together here. So for those who didn't hear a direct answer to a question you posed, we will try to circle back in some way or form to answer questions. You might get the answer in the form of an email, for example, follow up to this rally, but we'll try to figure something out. And I apologize for not having enough time to get to all of your questions. So I will give the microphone back to Whitney in the event you want to see off any of the guests who will be stepping away on the hour.
Yes, of course. I think we should all give, a muted round of applause to our senators Hornbeck and McGarvey. And thank you for joining us, and see you very soon once the bill files.
Thank you, Whitney.
Thanks, guys.
All right, so I said 2 goals. The second goal is that you are educated on what you can do to assist us in this effort at this historical moment in the state of Kentucky, where we have a real chance of doing something to help keep people safe. And so to kick that off, I'm going to pass it over to Nalini from Sandy Hook Promise. And let me go ahead and get the PowerPoint up because we have a great visual to help share.
Awesome. Yeah, I can get started. Thank you so much, Whitney, and thank you to everybody on this call for taking time out of your day to be here with us. We've heard a lot of great information about the bill itself, about CARR, and many of you had questions about the specifics. We now want to talk a little bit more about what action looks like and what you can do in your community or individually to move this bill forward. So again, my name is Nalini Ramachandran. I am the National Engagement Manager with Sandy Hook Promise. So I oversee our grassroots outreach efforts, which means working with people like you to advocate for violence prevention throughout the country and in Kentucky. So as you've heard from everybody today, it really is going to take a joint effort and combined strategy to advance CARR orders in Kentucky. So I want to talk a little bit about grassroots actions, why they matter, and what you need to know in order for them to be impactful. There are a couple different reasons that we're going to ask you to take action. First and foremost, it's because we know that it makes a difference. I know that the senators just topped off, but we know that legislators need to hear from their constituents in order to direct their action. Policy change comes from grassroots action in addition to all the things that we just talked about, in addition to all these conversations we're having with folks in rural and urban areas. And for that reason, legislators need to hear from, as vast of a population as possible, and especially the district that they represent, so that they can move forward knowing that they have the support of their constituents. In order for grassroots actions to work, they have to be coordinated, personal, and strategic. So coordinated means that we need to work collectively. As you can see from this image here, we're a lot stronger when we move in unison, right? We're more impactful if we swim in one direction at the same time rather than operating separately. It just makes us a stronger body, and it makes sure that we're being heard collectively as opposed to one-off conversations or one-off recommendations. So that's why you will always hear from Whitney Strong or Sandy Hook Promise before you're asked to take action. So we will tell you exactly what to say, exactly how to say it in order to make the biggest impact. So always remember to just hold and wait for that green light from one of us first, because that means that we're pressing go on an organized and collective strategy that's coordinated and works together. As I mentioned, it's also important that your conversations or your messages to your elected officials are personal, and that you customize your message. So we will be sure to give you an idea of what you should be saying and who you should be saying it to, but it's really important that you also tell your story. It doesn't have to be a really involved story. It doesn't mean that you have to have a direct impact with a CARR order or what it would do specifically, but why it matters to you and why you care about this issue and why you're taking time out of your day to actually send this message. Those are important things that legislators need to hear from as well. More important than any single one message that's being sent is really what the personal impact is to their constituents. Lastly, grassroots actions need to be strategic. That means that they are directly driven, again, by what's going to make the biggest impact in that moment and to that particular audience. So we might know that certain legislators and their offices pay way more attention to phone calls than they do emails. So in that moment, we might ask you to make a phone call because we have a really clear sign that it'll make the biggest impact, and that's the best way to connect with that office. Vice versa, we might know that another tactic really resonates and sits well with a particular office, and that they like to hear from their constituents in a very particular way. And we'll ask you to take action based on that as well. But with the overall CARR effort in Kentucky, we're using something called a hero strategy with our messaging and tone, which means we really want to emphasize the positive role that legislators can play in passing CARR and the positive impact it'll have on both gun owners and non-gun owners alike. So in this case, we know that presenting opportunities for these elected officials to be leaders, to set Kentucky apart, to set themselves apart is going to be the best thing that motivates them to support us. So that's why when we ask you to take action using a certain tone in your messaging, we are asking you to do so in order to make the biggest impact, in order to actually affect change with those legislators. That's why you'll, again, often hear from us that we're asking you to take a positive tone, talk about opportunities, and talk about what is possible rather than what's not. So when we're talking about what action looks like right now, this week, when the bill drops, as you heard from Senator Hornback, within the next couple of days, your action will focus on general support and asking for a hearing. A hearing is the next step moving it forward in this process, and that's what we really want to mobilize around. Again, you'll want to use a positive tone. You'll want to demonstrate the opportunity for legislators to take support of this life-saving bill and to do so in a bipartisan manner, to combine efforts with their colleagues in the legislature and to do this collectively and do it together. When you call for Whitney Strong or Sandy Hook Promise, it's really important that you focus on just one bill, and that's the CARR order. We'll have a bill number for you when that bill drops as well, and you just keep referring back to that. We know there are lots of other issues on the table. We know that you probably have a lot that you want to talk to your elected official about. It's just important that when you're taking action on behalf of one of our organizations or you're using one of our organization's names, that your messaging is really clear and consistent. And that means focusing on just one thing at a time. And right now, that means focusing on the CARR order. We'll want you to take an action individually, but as you've heard from Whitney, this is all about network building. This is all about expanding the pool of people who can take action and motivating them to do so. So once you've taken action individually, we want you to tell your network, that means your friends, your family members, your community members, to take action with you as well. You've heard so many good reasons why CARR works for everybody in Kentucky, and it's not just about one set of people or with one set of beliefs. We hope that you can take some of that with you and actually bring that back to your community and motivate them to take action as well. It's really important that you build that network because we want to build a higher volume of people who are sending the same message or same stories to their legislators. When you do that with a higher volume, we're again increasing the impact that we make to those elected officials who actually have power to move things forward and to do something about this bill. So with that, I'm going to pass it off to Waller to talk about how to take action with Whitney Strong, what those logistics look like, keeping in mind all the things that we just talked about and how you can make that biggest impact moving forward.
Great, thank you, Nalini. That was great. Thank you so much, Nalini. I really appreciate your help. It sounds like you've done this a few more times than I have. So you all know who I am. I'm Waller. I'm Whitney's husband, and I'm here to turn crisis, tragedy into action and to engage citizenry. So we are trying to make this get your support as easy as possible. So once the bill does go live, we'll be sending out emails to everyone, and we'll also have instructions via our social media on how to call the state senator and email your state senator. So we're going to have a specific crisis aversion and rights retention page at the Whitney Strong org. So you'll go there. There'll be two buttons, one for call the senator and another one for email. So when you click the call your senator, it'll have if you don't know who your specific senator is, there'll be a button for you to click and make sure you put in your full name, your address, zip code, and it'll locate your upper chamber senator. And make sure that you pick the upper chamber senator. You'll dial the 800 number, 1-800-372-7181. That line is staffed Monday through Thursday, 7 a.m. to 9 p.m. And then Fridays, 7 a.m. to 6 p.m. And it is closed over the weekend. So make sure you get your calls in during the work week. You want to tell the operator that you'll leave a message for your senator. My senator is Morgan McGarvey regarding Senate bill. We'll have that number for you regarding the crisis aversion and rights retention. The operator will ask for your name, city, zip code, and will also give you the option of leaving your phone number. So the script, it is very important that you identify yourself as a volunteer with Kentucky-based organization, Whitney Strong, that you are asking your senator to support the bill, and that you say that this bill deserves a committee hearing because it's an important step towards protecting the life and safety of gun owners in your community. And then remember to thank the operator. So after you've made your call, then you click the email your state senator button. And we've also made that very easy for you through the Action Network portal. So you will just go in with a little introduction on your left. So you're just going to start typing on your right, as you'll see here. Type my name. Is it 1315 Barstown Road? Oops. Okay, then it's going to start. You click the start writing button, and that's going to take you to this next page. So on the left, it gives you some information about how to customize your email. You're going to want to make sure it's going to go ahead and select your senator. Let's go into the Harper Angel. So in your subject line, make sure you include your hometown. So I would put Louisville, and then in your message, it's very important to give your own. You want to make it personal and custom. So that's the very first line they're going to read. So if you could customize, maybe just the first few sentences, put in a paragraph at the beginning, or maybe towards the end, you have that option to customize your specific letter to your senator. Then you click on send the letter, and it'll go to a thank you page and a way to share how to do this letter campaign with your friends. And remember that, go back. I'll go back to the other page. So remember that the call to action is going to be different every week. So the first thing is we want to make sure that you say that I support the crisis aversion and rights retention bill. And number two, it deserves a hearing. So those are the main two things, but we do want you to call, we do want you to email, and we want you to share. And also look out for next week, we will have a different focus for our bill. So in terms of what we want you to say and do. Okay, and then I'll pass it back to Whitney. And also, if you have any questions, you can go. You can email me directly at action@whitstrong.org.
Thanks, honey. So before we move into the next round of Q&A, so you can ask as many questions as you have about what you can do to take action, I just want to reiterate the most important points that Waller just shared. The first is your action, your call to action this week is to share that you are in support of this bill and that we need a hearing. There are only 4 weeks left in session and we need to get a hearing and we need to continue to move it forward with a vote and on and on and on. So those are the two pieces of information that need to be conveyed. If you click on that icon that shows the phone, you're going to be connected with all the information necessary to do that properly. If you click on the icon that has the email, you're going to be connected to the portal that will give you all the information to do that properly. So it is very, very easy steps to take. The other thing that I would ask, yes, if you have questions, you can email Waller at action@whitstrong.org with anything. Maybe you've got a friend who is the key representative for a large organization that could really pull in a lot of voices and you just have some more questions about the bill, go for it, email Waller. Maybe you have some questions around the platform, go for it, email Waller. But the last very important point that I want to make, and I started here with the very beginning, is we cannot pass this bill with Louisville alone, right? This takes pulling everyone together across the state. So please look at your network. Who do you know? Who do you know in Louisville? Who do you know outside of Louisville? Who can be counted on to share these two simple icons so that phone calls and emails can continue to go out until we get to passage. All right, I'm gonna stop sharing and pass it over to Aurora to do some more Q&A for us.
Q&A, all right. Thanks, y'all. Thanks to those of you who are hanging in with us for the second half. So we have some time set aside for more Q&A as it relates in particular to the strategy portion of things. And excuse me, I have one question that came in as Nalini and Waller were talking, and I'll put this one up first because I think it's both important and helpful, a very practical question. And the question is this: if one of my senators is the sponsor of this bill, do I need to make a phone call? So I'll start with Nalini since you talked about general strategy, and then Waller in the event Waller wants to weigh in particular as it relates to the information on the website especially. Nalini?
Yeah, so you certainly don't have to make the same phone call or email, but we always encourage you to reach out to the folks who are leading to thank them for the efforts, right? Exactly what we were doing live while they were on the Zoom call here. That's really important that they're getting into their inboxes and office phone lines as well. So instead of calling and saying, please co-sponsor the bill, just say thank you so much for leading and sponsoring this bill.
Thanks, Nalini. Waller, anything to add?
No, Nalini said exactly what I was going to say, just to yeah, be thankful. But it'd definitely be encouraging. You know, the more noise we make, the better. So.
Yeah. And I will add that you can go ahead and use the 800 line, the legislative message line that you'll find on Whitney's website with the instructions for the folks who will be sending the email that says, or making the phone call that says, I support, will you please support give this bill a hearing. You can still dial that phone number to leave the message for your senator to say thank you. And that'll just all the information in one place for you to find it, so you don't have to try to look for it on your own. But thank you messages are incredibly important as well. Okay, so general questions. Should folks be emailing and calling more than once during the week? How about more than once during the same day? Let's start with Waller and or Whitney, if both of you want to weigh in on that.
Yeah, so it's just, one is definitely necessary. Two is overkill. So as soon as they receive, the message from you that you're their constituent, it's all recorded. They've got it. So I'm not sure if it helps to do it more than once, but we will be asking you to do it next week. It's a moving, breathing thing. As soon as it starts, so to keep it moving, we'll have different focuses and different call to action every week. So we will be asking you most likely to call next week and say something a little bit different, and email with a slightly different tone to it as well.
Perfect, thank you. Anything to add, Nalini?
I will add, remember that there is much formality in Frankfurt, right? And we are here to be respectful of the members' time. And so I think that's another important message in all of this is follow the marching orders this week, take a little break, more marching orders next week. But don't exhaust yourself with 10 calls in one day or 10 emails in one day, because they won't get read. And at some point you start to worry that you are exhausting the legislators, which is not good.
And tone is also, as Nalini mentioned, is very, very important, that you're upbeat and you're not aggressive and telling them they're doing things wrong, but thanking them for doing things right. And this is something that we all need and is most right and righteous.
Thanks, Waller.
Yeah, that all sounds right to me. So if you're thinking about all the things you can do this week, making one phone call and sending one email, and then using all your extra time to drum up more support in your networks and communities, right? Less important that you're making 10 calls a day or calling once every day at 11 a.m. More important that you're finding someone else to make that call at 11 a.m. the next day, and that they're sending that on behalf of, ideally a different community outside Louisville, outside Lexington, something like that. But that's a really good way to use your time if you're thinking about drumming up support.
Great, thank you, Nalini. And this question is for Waller. The question is this: can we get a letter or an announcement of some sort to send to our church or our book club, etc., with the information you shared in order for them to share it out quickly?
Absolutely. You just email me at action@whitstrong.org, and I will give you all the information you need.
Okay. Can you spell out the email address just in case folks didn't have a chance to see it when it was on the screen?
Here, we'll pull it back up.
Great. And there you have it.
Yeah.
All right, the general email address where you can submit questions and ask for resources. So here's another question. This bill is being introduced in the Senate, right? So should folks be reaching out to their state representatives at this time as well?
No, it's really just the upper house's thing at this moment.
Okay.
Yeah, so we need to move it through the Senate. We need to get that hearing. It needs to pass out of that hearing. Then it needs to pass out of the floor. And then you throw it over the fence and it moves into the House. So that's about at least 3 or 4 steps from where we are now. So be very targeted in your efforts, and we will guide you to be very targeted in your efforts.
Okay. And here's a question that relates a little bit to the questions we got earlier about process, but also about folks who are getting ready to make phone calls or send an email. In the event they have an opportunity to actually speak to their senator, right? And let me pause here and say that you may not get your senator on the phone, and that's perfectly okay. Leaving a message is still an effective way to do it. But in the scenario where you, I don't know, bump into them in the grocery store and you're going to have a conversation with them about CARR, and let's say your senator asks, or let's just even say a friend, as we got in the book club, or a friend in the church asks how CARR will help both avert a crisis and retain rights. What is the very short form, like 2-sentence, how I explain this to my friends?
So I think one thing we can offer up is we have a field advocate flyer that helps talk through those points, and we'd be happy to send them to everybody that has participated in this call, so we can include that in the replay. It sounds like I should also record what I said several times throughout this call, but I think it boils down to use the name to help you, right? What is it? It's for averting crisis. What kind of crisis? Firearm, suicide, or mass violence. And then retaining rights. And what does that mean? That we're trying to intervene before the crisis erupts, get the person the help that they need so that they can be reunited with their firearm. And so all of that is in the flyer that we'll send out afterwards.
Perfect, perfect. And another way folks can think about it, and this is I'll add, is that on the rights retention side in particular, is that CARR opens the door to take action, to lean in before the firearm is misused. And if you can prevent somebody from misusing their gun, be it against themselves or against others, then they don't actually lose their right to bear arms going forward. So that's also a way to conceptualize it and to talk about it with others. In terms of mobilizing folks, you all talked about mobilizing your network and your friends and other groups you know. So let's talk about groups and other communities, other professions, anybody that you all kind of have thought about that you think might have an interest in this that folks can reach out to and try to get them to participate.
Yeah, so we have a good base of field advocates that we meet with weekly that are already starting to pull together organizations that have a broad reach, but that by no means means we have the Kentucky market covered. So when you start to think about organizations that could be pulled into this work, it's really anybody who has a vested interest in preventing suicide or keeping their communities safe. So we've been working a lot with the medical community. That seems to be an obvious one. The mental health community as well, especially with our common goal of ending firearm suicide. But that is not where it needs to end. There are many other leaders within the community that have organizations that can get on board. And I would suggest that you use that same email address, action@whitstrong.org. If you have a connection to an organization that maybe you just don't feel comfortable giving them the 5-minute spiel, just ask us. I'll show up, Waller will show up. We will then direct them to our 2 simple icons. Click the email, click here to make the phone call, and we'll make sure that they're prepared to help us.
Any other community that comes to mind for you, Nalini?
No, just underscoring that because this is a common goal and because it applies to everybody, that there is very much an avenue for everybody to be involved. So someone had mentioned your church and your book club. You may not even think of those as having a direct vested interest in the output of a CARR order. But again, if they're people who live in Kentucky and who are residents and who care about their fellow neighbors and themselves, that's enough of a reason to get involved. So it can be as concentrated as the medical field or mental health field, people who are directly connected to the order. And it can also be someone who just cares about these issues and just cares about making the Commonwealth safer.
Mm-hmm. And when individuals who are part of a particular profession make the call or send the email, Should they self-identify as who they are? Should they say, I'm a medical doctor or I'm part of this health profession? If, for example, they are a member of law enforcement, is it helpful for them to self-identify as being a member of law enforcement? And we'll start with Whitney and Waller.
I don't care what. Yeah, the more personalized you can make the message, the best. So something that rings, true and authentic as you is a lot better than just saying, "Hi, I support this. Thanks," and get a hearing. Thanks. If you can actually make it personal, it's like any story. It's going to resonate with the reader. If the reader trusts the story, then it'll impact them personally. So. Yes, be as personal as you can, but give as many details as you can. Actually, in the email, I don't think there is a limit of characters you can actually put into it. So you can tell your whole life story if you want about how it's affected you and how much it's needed. But yes, make it personal.
And I'll just add one pro tip. That platform that we're using for the emails is so unbelievably simple that you could complete it in less than 5 seconds. So do not go the way of simplicity and convenience. Go the way of customizing, at the very least, like Waller said, that intro subject line, and then also that intro paragraph. Because as someone who has met with more than 50 legislators in Kentucky on this issue in the last couple of years, I know that the form letters don't mean that much to them. So please make sure to customize that intro paragraph. And to share that, last point, and to share that with your friends and family when you ask them to participate.
Perfect. And so a question for Whitney, and this doesn't relate so much to strategy so much as it relates to what the legislation actually does. I think this question is coming from the frame that CARR is most helpful in the two scenarios that you talked about, which was to help prevent suicide and to help prevent a mass shooting. But the question is, does this bill help, or would it apply in any other type of situation? And specifically the word that was used was, does the bill focus on homicides other than mass shootings?
No, it often comes up in the context of domestic violence, and you may or may not be aware that we have domestic violence protection orders today that can be taken out against a partner. And in those instances, a firearm prohibition can be attached to those orders. So this whole one-on-one scenario, I am concerned about this one other person. There is a solution for that today. What we have found is that there is not a solution for either suicide, preventing suicide, or someone is threatening to harm many people. So mass violence has many different definitions depending upon who you talk to. I'm not even championing one of them per se, but if you have someone that is threatening to hurt more than one person, and it's outside of a domestic violence situation, then this could work. It doesn't matter if it's violence that's going to happen in the home, it's violence that's going to happen at a school, at a workplace, like what happened to me. It is just a tool to be able to deal with that situation, because there is not a legal path to be able to deal with that today.
For like a colleague or a peer or a neighbor, someone that you do have a relationship with, but it's not in the household.
They're not your partner.
Mm-hmm. And I'll just add that the legislation itself doesn't have, for example, a list of the types of situations or potentially violent scenarios in which the bill or the legislation itself would apply. So conceivably, if you were an individual who knew that your sister was talking about using a firearm to harm her former supervisor at work, right? That's neither a suicide situation, it's neither mass violence. If you knew that that was going to happen, or you suspected that your sister is on the brink of crisis and about to make this really bad decision to use a gun to harm one other individual, most certainly a CARR order would apply, right? What Whitney was talking about are the two scenarios.
Nalini, you're still there, right? Not frozen? I can see you wiggling your nose.
Question you want to answer?
Yeah, where she was going, I'm not so sure, so I don't know that I can pick that one back up, but I think the point still stands that it can be used in a many number of situations where someone is threatening to harm others, whether it is one person or 20 people, outside of the confines of domestic violence. It is a tool to solve for that problem. Oh, and now we've lost Aurora. I'm going to go through these questions and see if there are any other ones that we need to answer before we close up for today. It looks like there's a question at the beginning that talks about 72-hour holds on gun purchases, also statistically decreasing suicides. I'm familiar with that work and think that is another solution to help reduce gun violence. But at this point, we're very narrowly focused on crisis aversion and rights retention orders.
Whitney, there was a question related to outreach, asking if it's helpful to identify one's own political party or how you vote. For example, if your senator, if your state senator is Republican, is it helpful or better to say that you two are Republican?
Right, if you're a constituent, they have to represent you regardless of your political affiliation. So I'm not sure if it's necessary. I don't think it hurts to say it, you know, or not to say it. I'm not sure if it helps either way. If you're their constituent, they're responsible for representing you.
Yeah, I would say that goes with the customization piece, right? What do you feel like is most essential to your participation? Another similar question we get is, should you identify if you're a gun owner or not? We won't necessarily inform you either way of the laundry list of things that you might want to include, but if you feel like that's an important part of connecting with your representative, or rather with your senator, and telling them why they should move forward with CARR, then I think that it doesn't hurt for sure.
This question, I think that Aurora did a really good job of getting through most of these. I'm just doing a quick check to make sure we get to the last of them. There's a question around when the bill will be filed and when we will be able to read it ourselves. Senator Hornbeck said that we would file tomorrow or Wednesday, as Wednesday is the last day in the session. And then, of course, as soon as it's filed, anyone has access. They have access publicly to the bill. Let's see, anybody else? Any others, Nalini? Feel free to see if you catch one.
Sure. There was one question, again, framed around the legislation specifically and what it does to enhance bipartisan support. I think you've heard a lot from Whitney specifically of how intentional this bill is in really representing all of Kentucky. And so I'll pass it off to you, Whitney, in terms of what are you doing to really ensure that there is bipartisan support and that it's not narrowly focused on guns or Second Amendment issues.
As an organization, we believe that bipartisan action is the only path to real change. And so you heard the story from the very beginning. I was so grateful to have the support of Senator McGarvey, but knew that we needed to find support across the aisle if we were to pull everyone together and to make progress in a state like Kentucky. And so as we continue to pull in more co-sponsors before the bill is filed, there will continue to be a strong effort to make sure that we pull in both Republicans and Democrats, because regardless of working on gun violence prevention, we believe with any issue, the best way you get to a solution is you pull people together and you consider diverse thought. So we will continue to make that a priority. Was there a second part of that question, Nalini?
No, I think that covered it.
We know for sure we have one other co-sponsor at this time, and it is Senator Julie Rocky Adams, who is a Republican out of Louisville. Aurora, I know we lost you. We were trying to make sure that there weren't any other advocacy questions left in the queue.
Okay, and I apologize for that. That was my internet that decided to take a small vacation. But it sounds like those are all the questions. I don't see any unanswered questions left in the queue on my end.
I do see a few left relative to the legislation, and what I would like to do is handle them separately since we've all been on a long time together with a Zoom call. But I appreciate everyone who stuck through and participated up until the end. It is just an exciting moment for me. It's really exciting. It is exciting for the organization, and it should be just as exciting for you as citizens of Kentucky to know that we have come this far with a piece of legislation that will help keep us safe. And we will continue to make history and move it forward with your help. So watch for communications. We will send you an email communication as soon as the bill files with those two icons. Click here for the phone, click here for email. And then we will continue to send you marching orders each week so that you know how the call to action is slightly tweaked, right? As we continue to move this forward and get ourselves into a hearing. I thank you from the bottom of my heart, and I can't wait to see how far you take this.